Welcome to the museum. We're delighted to host a panel discussion that Ann Scheid has organized this evening. She right now has a 25-year retrospective mounted at over 3 separate exhibition spaces in the city. We have the latter part of the retrospective here in the museum, and she also has the early years at Arte Americas and the middle years at City College Art Gallery. And if you can set aside an afternoon, we open at 11, and then go to each space in chronological order and get a sense of the scope over 25 years as a drawer, as a recently retired professor of art at City College, devoting most of her career there. You will get the full gist of why she's doing this panel and what her oeuvre has been since she was a graduate student in the 70s. So Anne arrived in Fresno in 1991 to teach drawing at Fresno City College. She was 2 years out of graduate school. And at that time, she was keen to share her interest in drawing with students, to make that her focus, and to really impart to them that it is not the beginning of a process towards a final painting, but it is art in its own right. And her teaching proved to be beneficial to her as an artist. And if you are able to go through all 3 galleries in the city and see them in chronological order, you'll see how that developed. It's quite obvious. Her curator selected the cream of the crop, as he says and she says, of her work over the last 25 years. So what you'll see is the best of what she's done. Her enthusiasm for drawing continues through today. She now doesn't go to school every day. She doesn't have students as she used to. And so she will be able to devote goodness knows what kind of time and in what manner to this love she has of drawing. So I welcome Ann Scheid and the panelists that she selected today to explain to us what is drawing and why is it important. Thank you, Ann.
Welcome. I'm delighted that you joined us today. Thank you, Michelle. I'm so pleased that the museum is creating for us a place and an opportunity for these kinds of forums and conversations in our community. They're wonderful. So today's topic is drawing. The panelists here are artists who practice drawing. Their studio practices vary, but drawing is the constant. They will introduce themselves in a moment, but briefly, I wanted just to say their names so that you know who they are at this point. To my immediate left is Diane Olivier, who joined us, came down today from San Francisco. Andrea Rose, Danny Jameza, Stephanie Ryan, and Caleb Henderson. And you are here because you have an interest in drawing. So as we have a conversation about drawing up here, let me encourage you to formulate a response, think of a question, and join us. The conversation will be richer if you do. The overview is for today. We have about an hour and a half. And introductions. Each of the panelists will show 4 or 5 pieces of their work and talk a little bit about their studio practice. Then we'll have about 40 minutes I have some questions, many of which came from the panelists. So I'll ask the questions and conversation among them will start. And then the last 25 minutes or so, I'll open it up to you for you to participate with us. Before we get to their introductions, I want to just say a few things about drawing. I'm not going to try and define it. Drawing is a human activity. It has been so for 40,000 years, when humans drew on caves with the simplest of tools. Drawing is a part of human development. The impulse to draw is virtually universal. The materials of drawing are ordinary. Pencils, crayons, charcoal. To make a drawing is a familiar, everyday occurrence. Despite these humble aspects, images called drawings can also be extraordinary. Drawing can be immediate or deliberate, fast or slow, physical or thoughtful, small or large, permanent or ephemeral. To draw can mean a scribble and an idea, a sketch, a finished image. Even alphabets began with simple drawn pictures. Paper is often the partner to drawing. The materials of drawing can vary widely. Pencil, crayon, charcoal, graphite, pastel, ink, anything that will make a mark or a line. Line is the purview of drawing. So let's find out who these lovely folks are. If you would, I think Danny's first, Ruben? I just went alphabetical.
So, I'm Danny the Mesa, and a little bit about myself is I've been drawing all my life. I started drawing as kind of a coping mechanism, going through difficult things, and it kind of became a passion. Then when I started getting more structure to it, it became a little bit more serious than that.
Ruben, can you show the images while he talks?
So I can talk a little bit about the images. It's really hard for me to talk about myself. So I've been doing studio work here in Fresno, and I show around galleries like Broadway, Art House, and others. And these are some of the pieces. Sorry about the quality. These are large pieces that basically start off as drawings. They start off as a blueprint. It's kind of a catharsis it's a release. And so what I do is I start by drawing. I start by contemplating, putting myself in multiple states of mind and emotions, and I kind of like form a blueprint. And then from the blueprint itself, as the closure of the full emotional state, I tend to paint on it with hazy transitions, with like a lot of color. And so I try to juxtapose everything also in a certain form where it becomes kind of sensitive. So even though the subject matter might be a dark or a sad one, I tend to kind of try to make it a little bit like beautiful to watch as it's like a sad beauty or something. So I usually try to decipher it that way. Next slide. So these all start, like I said, by drawings. This is one that is kind of about nature and nurture. A lot of my drawings tend to go over themes of like quantum physics, psychology, biology, microbiology, and I tend to use them as symbols and kind of vessels as to kind of describe or document what I'm going through at the time. Next slide. This was a drawing here that was actually done from a dream when I woke up in the middle of the night. And I actually drew this for one of Shai's classes, and I was telling her that in the process of this, as I'm going, I'm kind of building momentum of the drawing. It's never just like I know exactly what I'm doing. It's kind of the more I get into the drawing, the more emotional I get. And it's hard to tell what the quality it is, but there's actually like little like random teardrops drawn, and when I was drawing them, they actually came from real teardrops that were falling as I'm drawing. And so I just incorporated them into the drawing, and I kind of build from that emotion. And also like the blackening in the middle is kind of to subdue it a little bit. Next slide. I try to be very physical with my drawings. I try to create a lot of static. I think the line work is really important to me. I think to me it's kind of like a fingerprint. So I try to really incorporate the emotion I'm going at the time. A lot of people think that when the drawings are crazier, because some of my drawings are really static, and that's usually when I'm happy. So when you see a calm drawing of mine that's really basic, really calm, then that's kind of more of like a sadness. So I'm kind of like the opposite when it comes to that. So I put a lot of emotion, a lot of passion. I feel like the best way to transmit those images or those ideas or documenting the emotion is through marrying it with like a passion or a desire. I think that's important. I think that's what creates kind of a more intimacy with you and the drawing, and then also with the viewer and the drawing itself. Next image. And sorry again for the quality of these images. They're not the greatest. But this is a drawing I did. This was a live study, so this is also in a class. And he was sitting there, and there was lights in his face, so that's why his face was so bright. And it's a lot more dramatic. And then what I did after is I washed it with a watercolor. And the funny thing is that sometimes when you draw, you think it's done, but it's never really done. Because even after this drawing I had about a year, after I received it back, I still started working on it some more, and it's never really a finished process. Next slide. This is an idea for a new series that I'm doing, which is going to be coming out in June. This painting is actually a lot bigger, but it's called Grease, and it's about the connection between people, even no matter the distance. And so this again starts off drawing concepts, and then what I do is when I'm painting, it's kind of more of a relaxing closure because the drawing part of it is so static. The drawing part is so like I'm putting myself through a lot of emotions. So a lot of stuff is coming out, and some stuff doesn't work, some does, some doesn't. But usually when I start painting it, it kind of starts formulating what I want on there. Next slide. Okay, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, David. So we have the next one.
Alphabetical surprise.
It's the alphabetical surprise.
First, I want to just start off by telling Anne thank you very much for this opportunity / terrifying event. It's really great to be able to come and share feelings about something that I love so much. I must admit, when I got the email that gave us a few prompt questions of what we might talk about while introducing ourselves, they're very simple questions like, why do you draw? What is drawing? I can't like formulating answers to those questions send me directly into an existential crisis. So I'm going to spend the whole night trying to avoid them as much as possible.
We're with you.
So if you leave here tonight having no solid answers, we've done our job. But as I think about drawing, I try to think a lot about the way I approach art making in general, and drawing does factor that very largely. It feels to me like there's two prongs of it, and both of them sort of hark back to what Anne was talking about before. So here's an image, you can't see all that well. That's going to be the theme for every one of my images. And as we filter through, you might be able to see these kind of fighting forces that I feel like are the bedrock of how I approach drawing. And the first one is having to do with our nature as human beings to create order around us. And a lot of times drawing can feel that way, like it's like that chair, I want to capture that chair. There's some magic in me being able to get that, put it here, and I've somehow encapsulated what that is over here. So my ability to wrangle paper or whatever it is, these inert ingredients, through my own whatever it is, into something that captures the essence of what a person, an object, whatever it is. That's one thing, me exerting pressure or exerting my will on my environment and creating something out of it. And then the flip side of that, which is I feel like maybe a counterbalance to that approach, is allowing just this chaos to occur without attempting just a little admission, a little attempt to control the chaos. But starting off with that chaotic beginning and then seeing what's left there? What can I now do with this mess that I've made? And sometimes that happens with the drawing that's already done. So I've got a portrait or whatever, and I intentionally just destroy or let it, die is a terrible word. Let it die to make room for the mess that comes on top. So a drawing like this will happen on top of maybe a previous drawing that's very clear what's going on, and to make room for this thing that's not so clear. And I guess it's a way for me to bring life back to the drawing process, because in that age of capture, for me it's mostly people. Maybe next slide will have a good example.
Can I pause for a second?
Oh yeah.
Can we turn off the lights that illuminate us? It will make the images stronger.
And maybe now I don't feel so much on the spot. So this was maybe a little more clear. You've got some faces and some things that were underneath that needed to be let go for what's on top to occur. And I find that process really reassuring, as it mirrors kind of my philosophy on life. You're dealt this hand of cards that you have no control over, and it's up to you to sort of see what you can pull out of that hand, whatever it may be. And so rather than bottlenecking towards a specific goal, in these cases I'm sort of just following the landscape, following whatever I'm seeing. So maybe I get to let my imagination draw out of that mess things that I might see. If I can roll to the next image, something a little more clear here. So there's those two sides. This one obviously headed a little bit more towards a specific idea in mind. But all the while I'm thinking about and sort of obsessed with the fact that change happens, and in a short time frame like something like our lives, it happens observably and we can feel comfortable about that. But in a time frame, something like when we get into the thousands of years, I performed a thought experiment that was, I'm sure maybe we all have done as well, but I don't know why it hit me so hard this one specific time, where I was remembering stories about me when I was younger and thinking about the trips we took or whatever we did as kids. And then I was trying to think about those stories as they relate to my parents, like what do I know about them and their lives and what they went through. And there was quite a bit of information there. And then I cast it back to my grandparents, and it became more abstract, more stories, quote unquote. And then I cast back to my great-grandparents, and I found out there was nothing there. And cast to great-great-grandparents, I don't even have a name that I can put to it. I can look it up if I need to, but in that quick an amount of time, they were, to their direct descendant, essentially erased. That's a total downer thought, I really, and I try not to think of it that way, but that's sort of something that pervades my practice and pervades my approach to everything, is that the nature of something to change, for something to be replaced by the new, and to be essentially forgotten. So this way of working on this image in particular kind of captured that for me. Each of these things are dependent on the one next to it, even to exist. And yet over time, and this drawing is shown on a scroll that's pretty large, and it unwinds from one end, winds up on the other, so there's no real start or finish. There's just the progress. And it's kind of something, I guess, that, as I said, pervades the way that I practice, the way that I think about it, even art making in general. It's something I can't escape. What's the next image? I'm playing this game with myself now. Some more drawings casting back to family members and trying to get what detail I could out of poor photographs and poor, like what can I resurrect of a person from these old and sort of faded and forgotten memories. Let's go to Quiet Island. I think that's the last one. Oh, maybe that is the last one. I think there should be one. Ah, there it is. So close-up detail on one of those process shots that's just the chaos. But out of this chaos, something familiar is happening. We start to get hints of maybe a face, maybe eye. If something familiar starts to grow based on what I see, what I can pull out of it. So that's sort of me in a nutshell, I guess.
Hi, I'm Diane Olivier. One of my earliest memories is every Christmas I would get a brand new box of crayons, 64 colors. My mom would take the sharpener out so the crayons would last longer. I remember drawing from the earliest memories that I have, and decided to go to art school. So I went to Rhode Island School of Design, and there was no drawing concentration, so I had to make some paintings, but mostly I did drawings. Then I went to San Jose State and for my graduate degree, and I found that in California there was much more of a sympathy for drawing than I found on the East Coast. And I started to do a lot of drawings. This piece, actually, I think they're a little out of order for some reason. This piece actually I did in Cincinnati. I finished graduate school, got my MFA at Berkeley, and then I got a job full-time, which surprised the crap out of me, at the University of Cincinnati. And they had a graduate department, and they had a concentration in drawing, which is how I met Anne. So this is really, really great to be back with her in this state. I started working in San Francisco in 1991. She started working here in Fresno in 1991. So this piece is from Cincinnati, and there were a lot of buildings being torn down. I found that there were a lot of abandoned buildings in Ohio, much less than there were in California, and San Francisco, the Bay Area. And these really interested me. This is a very large drawing. It's 8 feet by about 12 feet. And I remember when I was an undergraduate, I started to do drawings that were like 5 by 6 feet. And I built a wall that was for 8 feet by 8 feet. My drawing got to be 8 feet by 12 feet. And then I made a wall that was 8 feet by 12 feet, and then my drawings went 8 feet to 16 feet. So my drawings always exceeded the wall space that I have. It's a very physical process. It's almost like dancing, getting up on the ladder, or getting down on the floor. And I was really interested in creating this like leftover space, these empty places, and the presence of them being in front of an 8 by 12 foot drawing was, I think, had a real emotional impact. I had also had a fire in my studio the year before and lost all of my work. And this was a series that was produced right after the fire. So it kind of alludes to that without being flames. Next one, let's see what we have. Yeah, this is from when I was at UC Berkeley, no, San Jose State. And this is when the drawings started to get larger. I had gone down to Mardi Gras for the first time, and we went to Mamu, and oh my God, it was like being in centuries past. I mean, conical hats, and these guys were probably also in the KKK. I mean, who knew what was going on, really? At one point, my boyfriend, who was Jewish, they were talking about all the Jews that they met when they were working in New York on the oil rigs. And we kept our masks on for that. I had taken a bunch of slides. This is a lot about the progress of technology. So I was doing these on, that one's probably a 14, 16 foot drawing. And I was holding up slides like this in my studio and looking at them, then I'd put them down and start drawing. And there's probably about 5, 6, 7 different slides I'm using to piece this information together. This is all charcoal line and compressed charcoal on paper. Next one. This is after I became a mom. I went from doing these gigantic drawings to having a kid. And I was working full-time at the university, it's City College of San Francisco. And I found that I could not keep a drawing conversation going on in my head. With these large drawings, it often took a lot of time to get them done. I could go in, work all weekend, go back to teaching, come back the next weekend, disappear into the drawing. But boy, with being a mom, I had mom brain. And I couldn't keep track. I'd start something large and I'd come back a couple days later and I wouldn't remember what I was thinking. So I started going to the DeYoung, the Palace Legion of Honor, and drawing from the paintings there. So at the bottom, you can see this is part of a still life from a painting that was at the DeYoung, the rabbit. And then on either side of that were treasures, what I considered treasures. We'd go on walks with the kids, and they would find treasures. They're close to the ground. Everything is interesting when you're two. So, an orange peel, a seed, things that, I would overlook. I was looking for the big important stuff, and they didn't have that kind of hierarchy going on. So I also included on either side stuff from our walks, treasures. And on the top is a drawing of my son's foot when he was born. I was amazed at the size of his toes compared to the length of his foot. And it sort of became this trinity for me of all these different parts of my life kind of colliding and working together. And now the paper is about, I guess it's 30 by 45 inches. So, something I can manage within a couple hours. Next one. So this was intended to be my last one. I don't think it is, but as my drawing progressed, I got into sketchbooks, maybe about 15 years ago. I have to confess I have boxes of sketchbooks downstairs. And the other thing that I started doing 15 years ago was running drawing workshops to different places. I started with France, and I've been actually doing that workshop for the past 15 years. 2 weeks in the south of France drawing, heaven on earth. And I was keeping a pretty rigorous sketchbook. Now I run a workshop it starts in Morocco, goes to France, then I have one in Portugal, then I come back to the East Coast and do one in Gloucester, so you can get a real New England experience. This is a sketchbook page from being in Morocco, and I'm in Essaouira here, which is on the coast, and it's a huge, thriving fish industry, sardines, grilled sardines. And here the guys are taking their catch out of the hold in the belly of the ship, and not much is automated there. In fact, there's a big boat building industry, and I heard one power tool when I was there. I heard a chainsaw, and that was it. Everything else is done by hand. And here the guys are doing sort of the bucket brigade, getting the fish out of the hold, up over the boat, onto the dock, and into the waiting iced trucks that are nearby that take them up to Spain to get canned. So I'm standing there drawing as all of this is going on, and people are talking to me, and some people that tell me, oh, you shouldn't be drawing people because they don't really like images of themselves. And other people say, oh, let her alone, let her alone. It's really great because I've always been with a sketchbook. It's like getting a passport into the place you're going to. I've had old ladies bring me pieces of chocolate and hats for my head because they're worried I'm going to get sunstroke, and families stopping by and having their kids draw in my book with me. And I was in the Yucatan, and I had a crowd of people in Merida behind me. When I finished, they all clapped for me. It's run the gamut. I've met all kinds of people while I do my sketchbooks. I, in fact, have a sketchbook on me in my bag. I never go anywhere without my sketchbook these days. So it's sort of my lifeblood. It's that pumping heartbeat of my artwork or my sketchbooks. And the next one. So this is one of my landscapes that I did in the south of France. Landscape happened for me when my kids were about 2 and 3 years old, and we were going to the Cape. And I realized pretty quickly that if I didn't get away, I was going to be in charge of the kids 24/7. So I went to Provincetown, bought myself some watercolors and some sketching supplies, told my husband, I'll see you in a couple hours, and I went off to start landscaping. I went to grad school. I thought landscape was like a big no-no. And I decided, I'd been watching my kids do art, and they did not care what was supposed to happen and what was not supposed to happen. I remember my daughter dipping her brush into the yellow paint and then mixing it in the black paint without washing it off in between. And I almost stopped her, and she came up with the most gorgeous color. And I thought after that, you know what? I'm going to just make art because I love making art. I don't really care about how I fit into the contemporary thing anymore. I'm just doing what I love to do. And so this is me doing what I love to do, being outside, being in a beautiful place, and sharing this with other people who come with me, and doing these landscapes. This one's about 22 by 15 inches. Maybe one more? The big red one with hands? No? Is that the last one? Is there one more? No. Oh, all right. Then,
Hi. If you could just cycle through images 1 through 4 while I talk, that would be great. And I'll finish with image 5. Just a little bit about my background. I studied with Anne here in Fresno. I'm from here. And then I transferred to San Jose State as well to pursue a career in illustration. Since then, I've worked in feature film, TV, and games as a visual development artist. Most notably, some of the stuff I've worked on is Star Wars Detours and a game called Acidity. I draw to express narratives and to design worlds. In an animation setting, the function of my drawings are to iterate on numerous rough ideas, to create fully realized works which communicate complex concepts, and to serve as guides for animators and modelers. This work is always collaborative, and the results of coming together to create in a way that is bigger than ourselves is one of the most thrilling experiences I've had as an artist. In regard to how I approach my work outside of animation, I make a conscious decision for the drawing process to be present in finished pieces. I do this because, for me, this is where the subconscious feelings of the work live. In this way, an illustration has 2 coexisting narratives. One, which is the literal representation of what is happening in the scene, and the other, the tone of the drawn marks, which relate feelings about that representation. Concerning my technique, well, this is from animation, but if we could skip to image 5, sorry to jump ahead. But concerning my technique, my main process for drawing is a mix of traditional and digital. I begin with a rough sketch using parchment tracing paper. I scan the rough into digital form and bring to a finish using Photoshop. Expanding on this process for larger, more complex work can entail printing out a work in progress, using tracing paper to add additional sections or refine it, and then again bringing into Photoshop to finish. Drawing this way is giving me freedom because Photoshop is such a powerful editing tool. And using parchment tracing paper allows me to draw without inhibitions. If I screw up, I just crumple up the paper and throw it away, and I just keep going without skipping a beat. Yet it's so versatile that if I want to bring it to finish using that paper, I can. We can go back and sort of cycling through the rest of the work. I'm greatly inspired drawing, and I'd like to quote Kelly Sue DeConnick, a comic book writer, in a talk she gave about the importance of making people uncomfortable and still getting paid. She paraphrased Anne Curtis Johnson to make a point about people who were getting tattoos from imagery within her work. She said, "You don't get that tattoo to celebrate something in the book. You get that tattoo because the book celebrates something within you." And this is an important reminder for me that drawing performs a service, and the service it provides is connecting with each other.
Okay, so me. Too busy turning around looking at everything, and enjoying these conversations about everyone's work. So I'm Stephanie Ryan, and I teach at Fresno State, and I'm originally from the Midwest. I'm from Missouri, and I grew up outside of St. Louis, and I was one of those kids too who drew all of her life. I just wanted to draw, and so I always drew. However, I never thought about it. It was what I did. It was part of who I was and am, and I always drew. And so I was, I don't know that I wasn't serious as an artist until college, and it was through a series of events that led me to the school that I went to, which was Washington University in St. Louis. Events that were out of my control, in a sense. I mean, I did make a decision to go there, but I had to go there for family reasons. There were issues with my mother. She was terminally ill, and so I went back home to help my mother. And the only school that was open was the art school at Washington. The only school accepting applications was the art school at Washington University. And since I drew all the time, I thought, well, I'll just try it and then transfer out. I'll get into another area of study. But when I got into art school and started taking my classes, I realized this is exactly where I needed to be. And I fell in love with art and decided I had to pursue this and become an artist. So I guess drawing is always, for me, it's always at the core of my work. I tend to use it to, I don't necessarily start with a clear idea sometimes. I mean, I'll have these ideas that I'm working on that are floating around my head. Like this was from a series of, I had family photographs, and I was kind of delving into my own family after having children. So I started seeing similarities in my parenting with my parents, but both parents are deceased, so I couldn't talk to them about it. So I was looking at photographs and thinking about choices and thinking about how my life was growing up and how we parent our children and what that means in the world, how we teach them the choices that we can make. Anyway, so this is called The Old House, and it's kind of, I visited this house too around the time a couple years after I made this, or before I made this drawing. I had gone back for a family reunion, a high school reunion, and I hadn't been there in years, and I stopped, my friend and I stopped by the old house in the old neighborhood, and it happened to be for sale. And it happened to be empty, and the door happened to be open. So we said, let's go inside. I hadn't been inside of it in years. And we walked inside, and just the memory of this house, I mean, it had been, I think there were squatters in it. There was a lot of vandalism inside it, and it was kind of a mess, but a lot of the same wallpaper, the same flooring, the same carpet, the same things that were there when I was growing up were there. Not the furniture came from the picture. But so when I was doing this drawing, I was actually working on old wallpaper that somebody had given me, and I used, it's got flocking on it. That was you can't see it in this slide, but it was flocked with a pattern, which was very much like the wallpaper that was in the house when I was growing up. That kind of shimmery, greenish gold, white flocked ornate wallpaper that was so popular in the 70s. And anyway, so I did the drawing on that and wanted to kind of talk about the transparency of the fluidity of memory, images laying one over the top of another, and maybe getting confused or conflated, and having this predator, this wolf, this kind of scary or just strong creature walking through this house of my memory. So you can do the next one. And so some of the other things that I have been thinking about, and kind of that is an ongoing aspect that influences my work, is World War II, which sounds odd, but my mother was a survivor of World War II and was actually she was a Polish citizen, and she and her family were put in a Siberian work camp. And so this, being imprisoned and being taken from her home, informed and affected how she parented, and it informed her worldview, and the worldview that she had without maybe even thinking about it was that the world is unstable. There's no safety. You can only trust yourself. And so those were things that didn't fit in my suburban, living in Baldwin, Missouri, outside of St. Louis, in a suburban home, and those things were always a part of my, again, that childhood landscape of my mind. But so I've been interested, over years as I've grown to adulthood, I've been interested in finding out what happened to, like, loads of people who were taken from their homes or had, lost family members in work camps and concentration camps. My mother's family was a victim of Stalin's brutality. So a lot of that has been undocumented and actually obfuscated, which is very interesting. And it's only been recently that some of those records have been released about where people were sent, how they were systematically, families were broken and sent to different places. Children were sent to orphanages. Their names were changed so they couldn't find their families again after the war. And it's just a whole bunch of information that I really was a part of my childhood growing up, but that I didn't understand. And so some of this work is about trying to understand those issues in depth and making work that's kind of a response to that. So they're like watchtowers. This is meant to feel like a camp, and the most vulnerable are the victims. And the other thing is that I have this bunny that's often showing up in my work, and that was my toy as a child, and it was like Linus's blanket. I would never let it go. But it was kind of, I guess it symbolizes some inner part of myself, and the wolf usually symbolizes a predator, that kind of idea of predator and prey, and what comes of this kind of like large-scale destruction. So, okay, you can do the next one. Sorry. And this is another one in that series, so it's hard to see, but I brought in this one. This is a painting, but I don't know that I separate drawing from painting, really. I think I had a painter tell me when I was in graduate school and I was painting, you paint like a drawing. You draw with your paint. Why are you drawing with your paint? You don't paint like a painter. And I thought, what does that mean? Because I felt that, I don't know, I just felt that painting was like, for me it felt like drawing with a lot of color and also like transparent layers and stuff. But anyway, this combines drawing and painting. And so, the main image is this Polish doll, it's a Polish doll. And it's a little Madame Alexander doll that I had as a child, but then lost. But then my aunt, who was my mother's sister, sent me another one, which was awesome. It just appeared in the mail. So I started doing a lot of paintings and drawings with this. And so it's hard to see, but the watchtower is there. And this one's called Propeller. I actually suspended the doll from a light that we have that's got a fan on it. So I was thinking more of like a propeller in a plane or whatever, but she's stepping off the light, and the light could be the sun or it could be illumination, but she's definitely hanging upside down and in trouble, and then these wolves are coming into the foreground at an angle this way, and there's like a dead animal back where my shadow is pointing. And so it's very loose, and it's a combination of drawing and painting, really, because I start my paintings often as drawings and then work with both, with dry media and wet media. sometimes in acrylic. When I work with oils, it's harder to work with charcoal, but I might get oil pastels. But okay, next one. This is another example with the doll. This one is called Crawl Space, and so again, it's about the idea of having these larger forces that are larger than you, sweeping you away. In this case, the doll is kind of vulnerable. Maybe she's not seen though, but then there's this like big cloud of smoke and movement. So my work is really gestural, and often a drawing like this, actually this, and I think the ones before it all began as demonstrations in my class where I will demonstrate drawing techniques to the students and talk about different materials you can use. Like I often will incorporate shellac, kind of non-traditional materials, collage elements, different, I just mix it all up. And this was a combination. I was teaching them how to draw from a photograph and merge that with drawing from life. And then how to make abstraction come into play and become something mark making that can be powerful and expressive and not have to be something, it can just be active and emotional. So next one. I think I threw these together so quickly. And this was, and so what I also do, so again, this is another example of my current interest. I'm very much interested in cheerleading because my little daughter who's 7 is in cheer, and this is a new world to me. It's a really different world, and it's very interesting because it teaches little girls they have this power, and there's strength, they do tumbling, and they have to work together to make these pyramids and stand up and do amazing physical feats. And it's very demanding and requires lots of practice and everything, but it's also comes from this way of looking at women as like the cheerleaders on the sideline, this kind of, maybe not, showing women in the best light, like maybe just as supporting the male athletes, or, it comes from a place like that. It's very different now. It's a sport on its own. However, they still wear makeup, and I have to put a bunch of performance makeup on my daughter when she competes. And that, it's odd. It's a really odd mixture. So I'm starting a series that is going to work on these cheerleaders and the idea of being suspended or being thrown up in the air and being weightless, having power, physical power as a girl, and what you're doing with that power. So this is one of the first ones that I did because I have a friend whose daughter's a cheerleader too. She said she just sent me some photographs, and this is work from a photograph. I mean, I mostly work from life though. So next one. I can't remember how we put it. And so this is another demo. So I brought in this one because it's painting like I draw. Again, painting with mark making, painting. This is a demo in class. I have some more students here, but we started painting the figure. So we brought the figure in from life, and we're talking about how important it is to look at the world and connect and draw and paint from what you're observing and what you perceive, your impression of the world. It's a form of connecting. So drawing, painting from life, drawing from life is a way to connect, I think, and it's an intellectual act, but it's also a way of extending your perception outward and to connect with a person or even an object, but the world. So this was about with the marks. So there are loads of marks in here, and it's not done. It's just like coming along. But I think there might be one more. I'm sorry. I think I put in too many. But if there's one more, I'll do it, and if not, then I'll stop. Okay, that's it.
Truly gives us a picture of as artists who we are. So let's get on to the questions. Straightforward, and as I look at the questions that we have, many of them you've already spoken to in your presentations, but I'm going to ask them. So why do you draw? And I would like all of you to answer that question.
Ed's turn. That question to me, don't hit the mic. It's like asking why I speak English or something. Like I feel like couched within that question is an expectation to justify somehow, which is not a project I'm interested in engaging in. But I can talk about why I still draw, I think is maybe the question. Because as you said in the introduction, drawing is this universal impulse. And I think we see that, the need to grab something and make marks with it. And I think the answer to that question is as humdrum as my parents gave me some positive feedback a little bit. And that was enough to propel me to where it was just something I always did. So I considered myself, based on that, oh, that's really interesting. What, that little thing they gave me for the kids, that was enough for me to go, oh, I'm a drawer, I do this, and to not let it fade off. And so that's sort of the why I derive satisfaction from it, I think, was, I spoke to you a little bit in there, is that at some point it stops becoming a game of copy the comic book, copy to this, copy to that, oh, look how I can make it look like that. That becomes one concern, but it satisfies on so many other levels. The connection, I think, is a repeated thing there, that desire to communicate, which is really just a desire to understand and be understood, I think is facilitated by drawing, especially selfishly on my end. I get to really spend some time trying to understand, I think, and it slows me down and it allows me to really try to get past it. Because we'll walk through life assuming that the cupboards are brown, and that's just what they are. When really, if you sit down and you spend the time, you start seeing that they're not. And that was another form of payday. And there's a whole list of those that, as you keep drawing, start having more and more and more paydays and realizations and connections that you make that you wouldn't if you didn't engage in that activity. So my parents were nice.
Your parents were
Nice. I like that.
It's positive.
Yeah, what Caleb said is what I believe too, but I think I started drawing as a way to communicate, because I do think that it's kind of a pre-verbal way of communicating. I mean, it can be very similar to language, to spoken language, and to thought, but it's somewhere after thought and before speaking or something, to me. And I'm not sure where it happens, but I mean, because there are many points where, the drawing, it begins as an idea that's really loose, and I feel that I just feel compelled to do it. But it's also one of those activities that lengthens focus. So in trying to understand what you're drawing, because I do think maybe I started the same way too. I thought, wow, it's cool. I'm going to see if I can draw this plastic. That's amazingly complicated. I want to struggle with that. It's a problem. It's interesting. It's a game, but it feels like you're really learning something while you're doing it, because you have to focus all of your attention onto that thing that you're drawing and really see it with fresh eyes. And I think that that's the thing that started getting me hooked, is that I would look at the world and I had to look closely at the world. When I'm drawing something, I have to go into that zone and I have to connect with that object or person. And I start to understand it in a way that I can't articulate. And I think things come through in a way that I can't control. And so there's a dialogue that occurs between me and the drawing, and between me and what's happening with how I feel I'm connecting with what I'm looking at. And so there's many layers to it, and I think that just keeps me involved in it. It's a way of existing in the world and understanding and appreciating and seeing those details and focusing. I mean, especially since we're bombarded with multiple streams of information all the time and are really encouraged not to focus. And I find that, we'll talk about this later probably, but later generations, as I've taught drawing now for a while, since 1997, students, the attention span isn't always, they don't come in with that necessarily. So I think it's an antidote in a lot of ways to the speed of contemporary world. And I really love it. It keeps me sane. So that's all.
So drawing helps you to understand, connect, and slow down and really engage
Yes.
your world.
Yes, it's meditative, but it slows down time. It slows it down and it lets you focus. And my life is very frantic and crazy all the time. My kids are still young. I'm busy. I'm working. I'm trying to do art. I can relate to what you said, Diane, about your children making it difficult to focus and do your work. And that it is a challenge. So, yeah.
Well, I agree with both of you. That's my answer. I could probably like explain why I draw roughly in two parts. One being that one of the reasons I chose to draw was probably the immediate response of images that you were able to pull up by carrying a sketchbook, like he says. That's an artist thing that we just always carry our sketchbook, and there's something intimate about that nature where you're constantly just, it's something that, you know, on the fly you can pull up these images and document your emotions or your feeling or wherever you're at and intimately put it in this book. And I think depending on your own line work, your own style, your own whatever, how you choose to make it, you create that kind of setting for the viewer. So when the viewer looks at your drawings, they can kind of feel that intimate nature that you had, that you pulled up these images at that time, at that moment. You know, it's very candid to me, documenting those emotions of that exact moment where things were just right, where you had that inspiration that you needed to process this. So that's one of the things that I think is always kind of keeping me it keeps my love for the drawing, you know, besides the whole coping, besides the release, besides, the many health benefits, psychological. Also, I think one of the reasons I continue to draw is kind of something that you were talking about, and reminded me of it, which is kind of like neg entropy. Entropy being how time goes and unravels itself. Well, neg entropy would be kind of finding the structure, kind of finding, you know, building it, you know, narrowing it down, making it organized. And so I think as artists, we're constantly fighting that. We're constantly fighting, you know, trying to fight ourselves, you know, challenging ourselves, because it kind of keeps us on our toes as artists. And that's, you know, one of the reasons I do draw, because, you know, I'll start drawing on a library card, and then I'll draw on a huge piece, and I'm constantly kind of like trick myself and not let myself get used to anything, because I feel if I could just subvert it for a little bit, being entropy, it makes me feel like I'm doing my best as an artist. It makes me feel like I'm raising the bar for future artists, and it makes me feel kind of like it gives me more of an intimate nature with my drawing, and I think, you know, as I started drawing, it was very loose, and you don't know what you're doing, you're experimenting a lot, but then, you know, as you go, you kind of start building your structure, you kind of start organizing your thoughts better. And so I think through the process of drawing, no matter what else you're doing, whether it's sculpting, murals, whatever, I think the drawing is something that keeps me on my toes. It constantly is just throwing me, you know, on my side. I'm constantly getting new perspectives. It's kind of very personal. I can try new things in here, and, you know, it may not work, it may work, but it creates kind of an intimate nature with all my, you know, whether it's a mural, whether it's a large piece, whether it's a drawing. It's why I continue. It's constantly keeping myself structured, because if not, I hate the idea as an artist to get too used to something of what you do. I hate the idea that we might fall victim to, oh, you know, well, I'm good, and, you know, that's it. It's more like, no, you have to constantly be beating yourself And at least that's how I feel. And that's why I draw, because I like beating a drawing down so much that sometimes I feel like after you do that, all that's left is essential for life.
So there. That's the best. So drawing is a mirror. That helps you to be honest and helps you to be real and authentic.
Oh, yeah, very much so. That's, in fact, when I can't find who I am, I think when I center back to a drawing or back to the art is where I start remembering who I am and rediscovering.
Thank you.
Why do I like to draw? Well, like I said before, I like to draw. I draw narratives, and narratives are everything from a story, start to finish, or the story of a character as they drink a cup of coffee and sit by a window. That's a narrative. It's telling the story, and I draw imaginary worlds. And I draw because I find that the truths about life that exist in your body is super compelling for me. I can't get enough of that. And every time I finish a drawing, I'm sucked into the narrative of it, and I want more. And I see other people's stories, and I want more. And so that's why I draw.
It keeps giving you more and asking more.
Yeah, there's truth in it. I think the truth part is what's important and why I draw narratives, because that truth is a reflection of life. I think it's why people are compelled to Batman. You know, there's something true about him. There's something, and the comment people made about finding finding you in someone else's work, and it's that truth. And so it's a thrill to draw that. I mean, that came out of my pencil, I know. Well, it came out of your brain, but it's drawing it, it's like, that's its ultimate.
So giving expression in life to truth.
Make everything sound so good. I think the first thing about drawing is just its physical appeal to me. I mean, like I talked about that box of Crayola crayons, I can still smell them. Opening that box, like, oh, I knew all these drawings I had, and that feeling of the crayon on the paper, and how different paper would like make bumps, and others were really smooth. And I really remember connecting to that very early. And then I remember when I was probably 12 or 13, my uncle gave me my first real honest to God sketchbook. I still have it. And a charcoal pencil. And that was a whole other different world that I had never experienced. And that feeling of that dry charcoal scraping on the paper and rubbing my fingers into it. Oh my God, I love getting dirty. And when I started to learn how to use the computer, oh, it was so frustrating. I remember doing a weekend with the computer and crying in front of the computer. I felt so stupid. And just going to my studio and taking paper out, just like putting paint from sauce all over it, a watercolor, and pouring water on that charcoal, and I was like covered up to my elbows. And it's that physical quality, that I never got from painting. I always felt like there was this distance with a brush, at the end of the canvas. And I sandpaper sometimes straight through the paper, and I have shards of paper hanging there. It's really visceral, and I love that. And I love that drawing is a verb for me, I love it in my classroom when I can finally hear my students drawing, that energy of the charcoal going and that scratching. And it's like everybody's sweating at that point because the model's working hard, we're working hard. And it's so direct. And the fact that you hardly need anything to draw. I mean, you could take a stick on the beach and make a drawing. And I love, I've heard like the first drawing made was of two gods. I'm very bad with names, sorry gods. But her lover was about to leave and she was distraught and she saw that his shadow was cast on the ground. So she took a stick and traced his outline, and that was the first drawing. And I mean, what could be simpler, right? I remember standing in the caves in the south of France and looking at the cave drawings, and like shivers down my spine. It's so, you can see the mark making, you can see the artist's hands, and look at those Leonardo drawings, and you can see his whole thought process. It blows me away, you know? I love that it's, I mean, not all drawing is like that, but so much of drawing is, like I can see them, as I am an artist, I understand what they were doing, and they haven't hidden any of it, it's right there. And I love that it can be giant, or it can be as small as a postage stamp, or you can throw shellac on it, or I've done drawings where I've used a sewing machine, and that's my line. And like, really, where's the boundary? There is no boundary. So, you know, and I also learned from different shows that I went to, like what drawing could be, because I came out, like I said, at RISD, there wasn't a drawing degree. You had to be a painter or a sculptor, and I don't want to be a painter. And I remember going to the Museum of Modern Art and seeing a Jackson, de Kooning drawing. And my stomach dropped out of me. It was not matted. It was the first drawing I saw that was not matted. So it was this physical thing hanging in a box. And he had stepped on it and dropped his coffee on it and put his coffee mug down, and there was a circle where his mug was and his fingerprints were on it. And it took my breath away, and it made me realize that, oh, this is a really physical thing. Then the next show I saw that really influenced me was when I was at San Jose State. I went down to LA to see a drawing show, and I saw my first Robert Longo drawing. And Robert Longo drawings were, you know, this is when I was doing drawings that were like 4 by 6 feet. His were like 8 by 10 feet. And there was always the question to me, well, how are you going to show these drawings, you know, in grad school? Well, if you're going to do these, how are you going to show them? And it's like it didn't matter. You know, he did these giant drawings, and they built giant frames, and they put plexiglass over it. So that wasn't going to be a problem. And then there was in a show at the Brooklyn Museum called Monumental Drawing, and Cynthia Carlson had some drawings there. Because I thought, well, at least I have to have them in a frame or something. Hers were giant pieces, I mean 12 feet, like 20 feet long, tacked to the wall and just falling and hitting the ground. And it was like all boundaries were gone. So I realized that drawing could be anything I wanted it to be. So why do anything else when you can draw?
So the lines keep it alive, it's physical, and it's boundless.
Right,
Is
noun,
the-
verb, experience, process, all of it. Tactile.
Fantastic. I have way too many questions for 15 minutes. So I think I would like to open it up to you if you have questions that you would like to ask the panel as a whole or individual artists here. Is it possible to turn up the house lights for us and maybe quiet these a bit? There is hands.
Yeah. Or that woman in the middle there with a light blue jacket, long hair.
Yes, long hair. Yes, you.
It's so good to, I just had a question about, what was this is the whole panel, and each individually can answer it. What was the most emotional time that you found you were thrown into your work, and why?
What was the most emotional time that you used and put into your work?
Yes.
And why did they do that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's middle of that project right now. So maybe I can speak to it in as vague terms as possible. So yeah, right now in the studio, it's like chock full of drawings, different sizes, different colors, whatever, of my mother who recently passed, unexpectedly perhaps. And so that's, as something that jarring, so my normal approach is based on that dissociation, like realizing what, I guess, mortality is, maybe not realizing what it's about, at least realizing that it's a thing. And when something like that happens, I'm sure more people have, stories of that, and probably maybe more intensely than mine even. There's something about that jarring reminder that begs to be addressed, at least to me in the studio, like I have. And I have actually sat on this process. It's now been, it was early 2014, June of 2014, so we're coming up on 2 years, and could get all the ideas going that I wanted, that I needed, or whatever, but couldn't channel those really out for fear of whatever, I don't know what. And so just right now, I think the dust has settled enough to start prodding at that. And in my studio right now, the drawings that I'm working on have vellum sheets that are sort of lay over the top of them so as not to be caught in mid-process. And I don't know why I'm doing that. It's like I'm hiding them as I go. Hoping maybe that as I produce these, out the back end will come something coherent, or some sense will be made, through that process. And so that, and I don't think that's an uncommon story, lost, driving artists, it's cliche, really. But when you're in it, it sure as heck does not feel cliche. And as someone whose primary concern is to figure things out in this way that we've talked about, that's providing the impetus to be in the studio addressing that particularly emotionally charged, which, knowing the way I work, may end up at the end of the gate, all of the drawings get destroyed in some delightful fashion. I don't know. So I'm currently in that process right now, so I can't really formulate better thoughts about it than that.
But drawing is there.
It is, yeah.
And it is the means that will help us through this.
And there's something comfortable about having, it's better than photos. It's not as good as real life, but it's having so many of them there, that I help to make them happen. It's like it's keeping that connection going, even after it's done in the best way that I can, which is horribly, equal to that is how horribly a job it is based on, comparing it to reality. Every single one of them is a failure, but maybe altogether they can be more than that. I don't know. So, sorry to bring you.
Well, the question is.
Yeah, thank you for the question, though.
Anybody else want to?
I will too, but I'll be saying things very similar to Caleb, because I think all of my work has some sort of tragic backstory, and things that have happened, but when you ask the question, I think the first thing that came to my mind was just the idea of, loss. And, for me, I experienced the loss of my father when I was 15, and it was completely unexpected. And to make matters worse, we had an argument the night before he died. So in my teenage, kind of arguments, my last experience with him was, kind of slamming the door. And that was very difficult for this little girl to grapple with. So I think drawing him, I only did one portrait of him, only one. But it took me a really long time, and it helped me focus my grief, and it helped me to feel like I knew I wasn't bringing him back, but I felt like I was doing something that was life-affirming and connecting. I keep going back to this. It connects me with the world. It's like, it's how I can be alive. and know that my whole life hasn't passed and I didn't engage, you know, and maybe that's my biggest fear, that I won't engage, so I keep obsessively drawing so I can engage. And then talking to people about drawing, because it's not just the drawing, because I don't want to hide and be over here drawing, you know, and then use that as a screen. I want to use it to see and then talk to people about it. And I think that's, so for me it was kind of like some sort of, you know, ritualistic thing. You know, I did, this helped me to grapple with it, I guess, in a way that was, I didn't have to use words.
Yeah.
So.
Somehow the drawing enables you to be emotionally real without having to find words.
Right. And I don't even know, I've got it packed away somewhere. I don't know if it's, you know, it's packed away. I've done a million drawings of my mother and other people who I've lost too. And I think that it's a way of being, affirming people.
Diane, you wanted to say?
Yeah, and here we go, death again. Okay. So my dad was dying on the East Coast, and I was on the West Coast, and I was going back once a month, and I had my sketchbook, and it was the last time I saw him alive, and I did a drawing of him, and he looks like a corpse. And, you know, this is just what I do. This is how I am in the world. I draw what I see. I draw what I experience. And this was no different to me. I mean, emotionally it was, but the process was no different. I remember that my brother, who's an accountant, was like horrified that I had done this. He thought that was the weirdest thing in the world. He still to this day does not want to see this drawing. And for me, it brings back this, like, I was present during this time. And there's a long history of artists doing this. We're just weirdos.
I'll answer quickly. For me, it's probably every process that I go to is just as emotional as the next. I don't think that it's a very like stressful and draining process for me. So I think I undergo a series of emotions where each time I do it, I'm kind of wiped out, and I don't sleep for 2 days maybe, and then, you know, like after I sleep, I get a new vision of what I'm drawing, and I see it in a different light. But it's each time I draw, or each time I do like a larger piece, it becomes the most difficult thing I'm going through at the time. Even if I'm not feeling like that, I tend to conjure those emotions where I put myself in a certain state where I'm able to be really sensitive and almost down to like the roots of your most, you know, vulnerable natures. And I think that's when I feel like there's an intimate relationship going on with me and the canvas. That's when I'm able to kind of convey thoughts or perceptions of self that I hadn't, you know, while living in real life or whatever. So it's kind of like putting myself in a room, and I'm not allowed to leave this room until I finish this drawing. You know, or it's like having like, you know, this person that, you know, you're just bringing into your life, and while you're drawing or painting, they're going to be here bothering you. And so you like, to me, it's like I'm finishing the drawing. Once I do that and I have the closure, the person goes away. You know, like there's no actual person, but I'm just kind of like metaphorically speaking. It's kind of like a demon. I don't know.
So drawing is an exorcism.
I guess in some ways. But it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be like an exorcism of like love, or, you know, things of a beautiful nature, like children and things like that.
So somehow it helps you to grasp and have and experience it fully.
Yeah, oh yeah,
The
that's
process of creating.
definitely. It's very sensitive thing.
Toshka, you had a question? And then you might have time for one more.
Okay. I did two, but I'll keep it one.
Nice and loud, please.
Okay. Let's see. Sorry. Okay. I'm personally having drawing issues transitioning between digital media and traditional media because of the lack of tactile nature of media. And I wanted to know if there was any feedback that could be given so that transition could be easier, because I feel like the visual feedback of the work is not as expressive as when I actually use physical media or traditional media. I guess I don't know.
I don't know what tools you're using, but the tools make a huge difference. I'll start real quick. Like I get, okay, in my process I described, I use a mix of both, and it's for that reason. It's taken me years to get used to working digitally and getting used to it, but in the years I got used to it, the technology has evolved as well. There are 2 places, if you're taking notes, write this down, kylebrush.com. He's an illustrator and he's a professional brush maker for digital platforms, and that's what professionals use in the industry. Also, and they're like $7 for a bone. Also, if you go to digitalbrush.tumblr.com, that's where people share brushes, professionals, students, everybody. It's a community of people who share different brushes. Wacom tablets are essential if you're going to draw. And I see this, it's technical, but it's important because digital is gross. It's not like paper. It's never, I mean, not never, it's just different. And I spent my entire college getting used to drawing with a Wacom and 2 screens, because I sit for 8 hours a day, like, professionally just working on my job. And ergonomically, that's a challenge. I'm not in a studio space. I actually purchased an extra large because Wacom tablets are like wrist movement. I get the extra large not because I need to be a super pro with my extra large. I do it because I need to move my entire arm when I draw. And so Wacom, but Wacom is the most important thing about that. And get those brushes, because some of my brushes I use digitally are Photoshop standard brushes, but a lot has, a couple months ago I got a brush. It was like, actually Kyle, who's an illustrator, he's called his animation pencil. It's a digital brush, and it's like drawing, and now I'm drawing almost entirely without traditional beforehand. But if you draw and scan that into digital, what it does is it makes it less difficult for you to like see where you're coming from a traditional point of view. And if you try to fight the digital media, it'll be more painful than it needs to be. I'll just finish by saying keep the faith. I mean, it's a medium like anything else that you just have to use. It's a tool. It's all it is. It's a tool, and it has so many benefits to use digital that are no better or worse than any other tool. It's just and when you talk about the not being a tactical drawing, those brushes will help. And I know that for years when I didn't have them, I mean, me and Anne would have discussions, right? We'd be like, they're just not sensitive enough yet. And I'm like, yeah, I know. and often, I'll tell you the trick I use is that sometimes brushes don't do what I want. And in Photoshop, it gets into a whole other can of how to actually use the program to get the brushes to do what you want them to do. I don't even bother with that half the time. I draw it and then I carve into my line to get it to do what my hand would do naturally on paper. And okay, maybe that sounds counterintuitive, but all the other benefits you get, like that drawing you saw in my GIF, I'll crop out parts of my drawing and I'm editing it, I'm moving it here, I'm copying and pasting and doing things that would just take so long traditionally to do that I get to do digitally. So yeah, that's counterintuitive, but then the payoff over here is just so great, and then I'm finished with the drawing like quicker than you can think. So yeah, practice with it, play with it, and make it your tool, and don't worry about what it was supposed to do. And then it'll feel like you're drawing. That's another one last note I'll make. So I make a conscious effort to make my digital paintings look traditional. I mean, that's a conscious effort. When you paint digitally, it's so easy to make it look like an airbrush piece of artwork. That because if you look at it as just a tool that it is and use it for just that, I mean, it has that potential. But like I do a painting or a drawing painting, drawing slash painting, I'll put in marks that I don't have to do, that because with Photoshop's editing power, I don't have to do it, but I make that choice because it's, my art. And that's what I think we have to do all as artists, like you were speaking, is using traditional painting as drawing. So that's something to play with and think about as well if you're struggling with the digital part of it, feeling too digital, not tactile. Think about a tool in Photoshop and how you can use that tool to make it do what you want, to make it feel traditional.
It's just a tool, yeah, to work somehow. And going back and forth between the digital media and hand drawn,
Yeah, absolutely.
which pulls it back in. There was, let's squeeze in one more question.
Well, I would like to discuss like some factors like personality, like sensitive personality, or some kind of different personality from other people that makes people like artists, look different and feels different about the world, and drawing cannot help them to somehow help themselves, to stay away from the weird world, or feels better, or helps them to go on.
So you're making a statement that drawing is a process that can be really helpful to those who are struggling, those who are in need of help.
No, I mean, in general, like they're artists because they're different. They look different, they feel different. And maybe that helps to other people too, it kind of like to stay away from the weird world, they have to start drawing.
So you're saying artists are a unique group of folks, and it is the fact that we are creative and expressive and practical.
I don't know what we are, or what you are, or what I am. I don't know. I'm just saying that what is it? Is it like because the world is weird, or we are weird, or what is it? What's the problem?
I don't know the answer to that, because I'll admit that I have this sort of imposter syndrome where I'll be like, I'm not really an artist though. I'm just sort of pretending to be. Yeah, really. So I'm just like, it constantly is assaulting me, like I just don't have the temperament of an actual, like what I think an actual artist does or is. I'm just like trying to be that, but I'm not really that. I put it on for so long that I can't put it off, kind of thing. And I don't know if that's common. I hope that's common now that I've said it out loud. But because I wonder about the same thing, like our artists, or what draws us to do, what pulls us to do such a thing. Yeah, someone had to do it.
And to keep doing it.
Yeah,
And to keep compulsively doing it, even though it's almost, it is one of the hardest things to do, to actually continue to be an artist. I don't make a living as an artist, I make a living as a professor. That's my income, and that takes up so much time, and I love it. But that, so being an artist, but I also think, so it's difficult, and yet we still do it, and yet we insist we have to do this. But I don't know, I think that there's also an idea that the artist is this gifted genius, who's divinely inspired or eccentric or, something like that. And I think everybody has the potential to be an artist. I think it's just human creativity. And there are some of us that really feel like we need to find a way to do that. But there are musicians who need to find a way to play music. I'm an artist. I love playing the piano too, but I don't consider myself a pianist. But it's any kind of expression. My mother never drew or painted, yet she sang, and she could embroider these gorgeous pictures. She could make anything with embroidery or sewing machine, clothes, anything, puppets, and so I think it's just another way that people express themselves. I don't know that it's like that artists are particularly weird, but I do think that there is an idea out there. You know, when you see, there was a really interesting film at the MoMA that and I can't remember the name of the artist, but maybe some of you will remember the film. It was maybe in the late 90s at the SF MoMA, and it was a series of clips of stereotypical artists, you know? Van Gogh, like drinking his turpentine, and, you know, just the idea of an artist, that idea of that wacky person. And it was really great to see this and to see how many times that idea, you know, it was a ton of clips. I don't think I got through the whole loop. I'm sure it was a loop, but I didn't have enough time to watch all of them. There were so many. And they were just short little segments showing this type of artist. And I think there are all kinds of types of artists.
You want to finish up, Dave?
I'd like to say that I try not to focus on what makes me different because I think that makes me feel really uncomfortable. I think it's more about finding my connection to everybody through the art. And so I think I'm more in the sense I like to kind of blend in, kind of like, even in my mind, I already feel different. You know, not in the sense that I'm like better than, not like that, more just like that I'm like maybe a weirdo. Like I feel like myself I'm a weirdo. So like I try to find a connection to the world around me. And you know, I won't even pull next to a person at a stoplight because they're really good watching me. To me, it's like I like feeling the connection or feeling closer to others. So I don't even know how to answer that.
Well, we have run out of time. I asked one of my questions, which speaks to the conversation needs to continue with each other in our lives. We can keep talking about what we do and what we're interested in and what allows us to live lives that are more exciting, more full, and more connected. So thank you for joining us. Thank the panelists tonight for their time and their generosity in sharing themselves.
And thank you, Anne.